The Walt Disney Company has always been synonymous with animation. Disney, practically since the beginning, has been the pinnacle of animation. If you say Disney, most people conjure up an image of a princess with funny sidekicks or some sort of anthropomorphic animal saving the day. But the Walt Disney Company has put out more live-action films than it's ever put out animated films. And even though Disney didn't make a name off of being a live-action film studio, the company has continued to make these films for over 75 years. If you saw my original live-action eras video, then you know that there are 8 different eras. My name's Josh Taylor, this is 1901, and today we're going to talk about how Walt Disney got into live-action filmmaking by combining live-action with animation to create the Disney hybrid era of the 1940s. After the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the Disney studio moved from the small Hyperion Avenue campus in Los Angeles to the much larger Buena Vista Street campus up north in Burbank, California. This extra room gave the creative team their own spaces for concept designs, Foley work, orchestration, animation, coloring, and more. The Buena Vista Street campus, the campus that Disney still has today, started to make more animated films in the late 1930s, but things would soon change going into the early 1940s. Not only was a world war starting to brew outside of the US, but in Hollywood, studios were starting to unionize, and that included the House of Mickey Mouse. More on that later though. Walt Disney's thinking behind beginning to make live-action films rather than purely animated films was a money issue. Animation was costly, and after the financial failures of Fantasia, Pinocchio, and Bambi, as well as the cost of building out the new studio, Disney needed cash. His idea was to start shooting films that were live action while adding in bits of animation, so that audiences going to see the latest Disney feature wouldn't be upset by the lack of animation. The first film of the era would be a fictionalized tour of the brand new Disney studio that would also have bits of animation featuring several Disney characters, as well as a brand new short about a dragon. The Reluctant Dragon was put into production in the autumn of 1940. Disney had made a short subject film previously called A Trip Through the Disney Studios at the request of their distributor RKO Pictures back in 1937. And this was prior to the move to the new studio. Disney thought they could expand with a brand new feature film to showcase the new facility. Comedian Robert Benchley stars in the film as himself, but as someone who wants to pitch a story, The Reluctant Dragon, to Walt Disney for a future film. When he visits the studio to meet Walt Disney, he dodges his guide, finding himself in several different rooms learning the art of animation. He initially finds himself in a life drawing classroom, but ends up seeing the sound design done at the Foley room, the camera room that features the multiplane camera, and eventually winds up with a few of Walt's old men animators to see how they animate Goofy. Finally being chased down, he's escorted to see Walt Disney, who's about to view a new animated film. And before Benchley can pitch The Reluctant Dragon to Walt Disney, he's told that the film they're going to be viewing is actually The Reluctant Dragon. The 20-minute Reluctant Dragon short is based on the Kenneth Grahame story of the same name. He's better known as the author of The Wind in the Willows, another film that Disney was working on that would make its way into a film later in the 1940s. The short film features a boy who befriends a dragon, who doesn't really want to fight the town knight Sir Giles. Giles, an older man and a Don Quixote-like figure, doesn't really want to fight either. The two end up reciting poetry together as they're both big fans, and when the town shows up for a battle, they put on a show while also dancing and drinking tea periodically inside the dragon's cave. The boy, who's secretly friends with the dragon, even calls him names like Punk Poet, which I'm sure I'll eventually put on a t-shirt. The ending of the short comes when the town accepts the dragon, and he proclaims that he'll never terrorize the town. Modern critics have stated that this short and the dragon itself are representative of the queer community. Intended or not, it definitely features an effeminate dragon who has to act a certain way outside of his home, but would rather not fight or burn the town. This also checks out with other films and tropes of Hollywood at the time, where characters could be read as queer without proclaiming it out loud, since that would have been overtly taboo for the time period. If you want to hear more about The Reluctant Dragon and its queerness, I highly suggest watching the video from my friends over at Dream Sounds, who made an entire video about this movie. I'll link that up in the cards above and in the description box down below if you're interested. The film was praised by critics of the time as well, though. Unfortunately, it didn't strike a chord with moviegoers. In a time before television, the only way to see something like this would be by going to the theater. With the name Disney on the marquee, people expected cute characters singing songs and making jokes. But what they got was a pseudo-documentary about how Disney made movies with cute characters. And it was followed up with a cartoon that essentially would have been the opening for any other film. The Reluctant Dragon would make very little profit, but what it did do was cast a shadow on the larger news from the Disney company. By the time the movie was released, animators had gone on a full strike, demanding more regulated hours and better pay. Walt Disney would eventually make a deal with the Screen Cartoonists Guild, but the damage had been done, and moviegoers were left with a sour taste in their mouths because of this new film and the strike that had been going on at the same time. People were looking to go to the movies to have a good time, and what they ended up seeing was what felt like a Disney propaganda piece for the studio, rather than a new animated classic. Disney's new union deal would bring animators back into the studio, but unfortunately another problem was happening at the same time. America's involvement in World War II would bring new features like Peter Pan or Alice in Wonderland to a halt, being shelved until after the war was over. The Disney studio would start filling up with government officials, who were looking to create real propaganda pieces that would help influence the world to join the Allied forces. Short cartoons would be made, as well as one feature based on Alexander Seversky's book, Victory Through Air Power, a book based on how the US and Allied powers could use airplanes as a strategy to win the war. Walt Disney originally read Seversky's book in 1942, and having been a patriot of the US who served in World War I, he rushed at the opportunity to turn the book into a film. He self-financed the $1 million to make the movie, shooting the live-action narration with Seversky at night, and having his animators push through the animation quickly during the day. The end result was an educational film with Seversky talking in an office, showcasing short animated features about the history of aviation and what long-range bombing from airplanes could do for the war. The film was shown in theaters beginning in 1943, and would even help as educational and instructional material for soldiers who were moving from battleships and being on the ground to understanding the strategy of an airborne attack. Outside of war strategy, Walt Disney had found a new stream of revenue with educational films and documentaries, something that would stick with him after the war and into the 1950s. But the Disney company also needed to start thinking about financial business, as the studio was just barely staying afloat at the time. So Walt Disney decided to take a story they thought up would be an animated feature and turn it into a mostly live-action film, The Song of the South. I made a separate video previously about this topic that's much more in-depth, so if you're interested in seeing a longer form version of A Song of the South story, I'll link that in the cards above and in the description down below. But let's get to this. And FYI, this is not my hot take. This is not a piece about whether or not the movie should be made public and join the streaming services, or if there should be any characters walking around the Disney parks. These are simply the facts and history about how the film was made. So, with that out of the way, by the mid-1940s, Disney already had the rights to the Joel Chandler Harris Uncle Remus stories. And since most of his movies were storyboarded by his animators rather than having a formal script, Walt went outside of his studio to look for somebody to write the screenplay. And Southern-born Dalton Raymond was asked to write. The 51-page script that he turned in would have to be revised, as his Southern-born slant definitely shone through. He was using names and words that outside of the South would have probably gotten Walt Disney into some serious trouble, more trouble than the film actually got him in. And with several people consulting Raymond on this script and revising it, some of the details of the story got lost. The finished result never made it clear if this story took place before or after the Civil War, or what the dynamic was between several of the characters on screen actually were. For the main role of Uncle Remus, James Baskett, who had voiced one of the crows in Dumbo, was cast, and Little Johnny was portrayed by child actor Bobby Driscoll, who was then contracted to the Disney company from many future films, along with Luana Patton, who played Johnny's friend Jenny. The live-action portions of the movie were shot in Arizona in 1944, while animation on 3 segments of the film would take place back in Burbank. The production would cost the studio just over $2 million, and Walt would use his time and money to try and make the production as non-confrontational as he could. He would hire an all-black vocal choir to sing on the soundtrack, and would even fight later for James Baskett to get an Academy Award. But ultimately, Walt knew that the film would be met with controversy. At its Atlanta premiere in November of 1946, Walt Disney would show up and introduce the film to the theater it was premiering at before completely leaving and going back to his hotel room. James Baskett and the other black cast members weren't even allowed to go to the premiere, as this was a whites-only segregated theater in the South. Upon its release, the NAACP would put out a statement to many newspapers stating, "The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People recognizes in Song of the South remarkable artistic merit in the music and the combination of living actors and the cartoon technique. It regrets, however, that in an effort neither to offend audiences in the North or South, the production helps to perpetuate a dangerously glorified picture of slavery. Making use of the beautiful Uncle Remus folklore, Song of the South unfortunately gives the impression of an idyllic master-slave relationship, which is a distortion of the facts." Critics saw the film as a continued fall for Walt, feeling that Disney was losing its magic as it was leaning more into live-action films rather than going back to the classic animation it was known for. But regardless of what critics had to say or the controversy that surrounded the film, moviegoers came out to see it, making money for the Disney company and getting them back on their feet. James Baskett would eventually get that honorary Academy Award that Walt Disney had fought for, and Zippity Doo Dah would win Best Song at the Academy Awards as well. And due to the success of Song of the South, Walt would want to once again combine live action and animation for his next film, so dear to my heart. Walt Disney was enthusiastic about the Sterling North book Midnight and Jeremiah, a story focused on a child at a 1903 Mid-American farm would bring up nostalgic memories of living on a farm in Missouri for Walt. When he got a hold of the rights in 1943, he was excited about the prospect of combining live action and animation to get this story just right. Studio contract stars Bobby Driscoll and Luana Patton, who Walt felt had good chemistry from Song of the South, would be put in the roles of Jeremiah and Tildy. Character actor Beulah Bondi, fresh off her role from It's a Wonderful Life, was cast as Granny Kincaid, and popular American singer-songwriter Burl Ives was cast as Uncle Hiram. The story, if you've never seen the film, sees Jeremiah raise a literal black sheep after it's rejected by its mother, and he spends the movie looking to get the sheep to the county fair, against the will of his grandmother, but with the help of his uncle and Tildy. Shot in Sequoia National Park in California, the movie is made up to look like Indiana, and it features a large farm with a barn and trains and folk songs and comedy. The movie is exactly the kind of movie you'd want to show Walt Disney. He would even go on to replicate the barn from the movie in his own backyard to house his miniature train. So Dear to My Heart would debut in Indiana in January of 1949, with Walt, the cast, and the book's author Sterling North in attendance. And like the previous film, it would be a financial success. But unlike Song of the South, there would be no controversy. Also, unlike Song of the South, So Dear to My Heart was praised by critics as being a charming story of Americana. Bobby Driscoll would get an Academy Award for his acting, and the song Lavender Blue would get nominated for an Academy Award. So Dear to My Heart has the least amount of animation of the 4 movies in this era, and for critics to have pulled a 180 and like this film, it gave Disney the confidence to continue making live action. On top of the new confidence that Walt had, he also had money lingering in Europe because of World War II. The UK held on to any money made from foreign films for the need to rebuild Europe after World War II. So instead of Walt Disney getting a revenue stream coming in, that money was held on to and had to be used to benefit the European economy. So instead of Walt Disney moving his entire animation team over to the UK, he opted to continue making live-action films in Europe, which would lead the Disney company into its golden age of live-action films. But that's a story for another time. I'm curious to see if you've seen any of these 4 films. Let me know in the comments down below whether you've seen these or you're gonna go searching them out now. And in future installments of the live-action video series, I won't be talking too in-depth about every single movie. As we go forward, there's tons of movies to talk about, so I'll be talking more about the key moments in films in those eras that really shaped them into what they were. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know I meant to get to this series earlier this year, but circumstances came up in my life, but I won't go there. If you did like this video, please give it a little thumbs up. If you've not subscribed to the channel yet, please do. It would really help me out. And if you feel like sharing this video around on your own social media, and you can check out the merch in my merch shop. You can see it down below the video if you're watching on a computer or on your phone. There's a brand new Punk Poet shirt because I thought that would be great. And if you want to join my Patreon, you can, and in return you get new podcasts and videos that are exclusive to Patreon. All the links are down below in the description, plus the other videos that I talked about are all down there as well. And until next time, my friends, thanks for watching and keep moving forward.